Hey everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point, and we are back to our United States versus Robert Sylvester Kelly updates. If you saw my last video, I explained to you guys that I had tried to I did order transcripts, but I was having a really hard time getting the transcripts. So the one that I actually paid for was for Monday, and they did eventually send me the transcript. But for some reason, she will not respond about Tuesday or Wednesday's transcripts. And so I'm still trying to find other people that I can talk to see exactly what is up with this chick and why she does not want to turn over these transcripts. And to be honest with you, I'm starting to believe Ann Donnelly might be telling them not to sell the transcripts to people, because this makes no sense that she even would have a job behaving the way that she is behaving. But before we get to that, that's going to be a separate video because, you know, it is like 3 or 4 days old at this point. So let's talk about today's hearing and what has taken place so far this week or the past couple of days, and then I'll catch you up with the Ariel testimony in my next video. And so today on the stand, well, let me back up. I told you all in my last video, I think on Sunday, or maybe it was a video that I did Thursday or Friday, that a lot of the reporters were not going to return this week. And that seems to be the case because trying to get information on this case this week has been very hard. The updates, even though the updates were very biased, they still aren't coming in at the rate that they were last week. And what I'm finding in the articles that I am finding is that they're all saying the same thing, which means that somebody with the Associated Press is posting their article, and then all the other news outlets are then going and pulling that master article off the wire, and then they're tweaking it and adding maybe a sentence or two to make it their own. So let's go ahead and read the article from today that was on the Associated Press. And it says that one of Kelly's alleged abusers recounted, and I think they meant alleged victims, okay, because they said here alleged abusers, recounted in testimony Thursday that the singer said genius artists could behave as they please, and compared himself to Jerry Lee Lewis, who married a child. The person, who calls herself Stephanie, said that she was 17 during their 6-month relationship in 1999, recalled a conversation with the R&B artist and 2 others when he said he preferred young girls, and questioned why people make such a big deal of it. Look at Jerry Lewis, he said, referring to the influential rock and roll pioneer who controversially married his 13-year-old second cousin in the 1950s. He's a genius and I am a genius. We should be able to do whatever we want, he allegedly said. Look at what we give the world. So Stephanie, who's now 39, is the third accuser to take the stand against Kelly, who's on trial in Brooklyn federal court for racketeering, exploitation, kidnapping, bribery, and forced labor between 1994 and 2018. Stephanie first met Kelly at McDonald's in Chicago, where one of his associates gave her his number on a slip of paper. And then you guys remember, I was thinking that this was Patrice Jones, but as I heard more about this person, the story with Patrice Jones isn't adding up. Remember, Patrice Jones met him at the McDonald's, and she claimed that it was on her prom night. But according to this person, she was on a date at McDonald's with her boyfriend, and it was during the summer months that they were there. And I find it very interesting that even though she said she was there with the boyfriend, she still took that number, and she claimed that she threw it away at some point, but then she ran into Kelly again a year later at the Nike store. So I'll get to that, but just wanted to point out that I'm now thinking that this is not Patrice Jones. Oh, and then the other thing, she said that she had never talked about this story before, and we know that Patrice Jones actually filed a lawsuit against him, and she has been quoted in several articles over the years. So Stephanie first met Kelly at a McDonald's in Chicago, where one of his associates gave her his number on a slip of paper. She threw it away and didn't see him until a year later when he was holding a promotional event at a Nike store near where she worked. She approached him hoping he could help her friend, an aspiring singer. That help never came, but Stephanie and Kelly soon after began a relationship, with the superstar brushing it off when told she was only 17, according to testimony. She described her relationships with Kelly as humiliating, describing in lurid detail his demands and saying he routinely filmed their encounters. Doesn't this all sound the same? It's like they're reading off the same script, but each one adds something new. So her new thing that she's adding is this conversation that allegedly took place where he compared himself to Jerry Lewis and said that he liked messing with the girls, okay? So she says that he once forced her to perform oral on him in a vehicle with others in the car, and sometimes left her naked and alone in rooms for hours. He could put the fear of God in me very quickly, saying she performed acts because I didn't feel like I had a choice, saying she'd suffered past abuse both at home and by a former boss. She also said she feared what the singer would do with the tapes that he had taken of her. And so around the time she turned 18, Stephanie said she decided to stop seeing Kelly. I felt used and humiliated and degraded. I just didn't want to be abused anymore. The first 2 weeks of the long-anticipated trial has included searing testimony from accusers, offering a glimpse into the sprawling web of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse Kelly, now 54, is accused of steering for more than 2 decades. Now Kelly denies all charges and faces between 10 years. And they keep saying that in all the articles. Okay, and so then there was another article I wanted to share with you all that gave a little more detail about what she alleged had taken place. Okay, this account is coming from Pilar Melendez. She says, on Thursday, Stephanie testified that she first met Kelly in the summer of 1998 when she and her boyfriend at the time were on a double date at the Rock and Roll McDonald's in Chicago. She said that while she was waiting in line at the fast food restaurant, a man approached her and asked her how old she was. Now, this is different from the AP article. Even though she said she was 16, the man gave her a piece of paper with Kelly's phone number on it, Stephanie said, adding that she threw away the phone number. And you notice how in all of these stories that they are sharing in their testimony, they all met him, at a certain age, but then it wasn't until, like, they all make sure that they say that it wasn't until they were 17 or they were 18 until they decided, to get with him, except for Geronda Pace, who we don't know what's going on with her or who she actually had a relationship with. But in any event, let's carry on. So it says that a year later, she met him at the mall at the Nike store. And she said that it was near her summer job. She wanted to try to catch him and score an audition for her friend Catherine. So the friend has a name. So maybe that means that Catherine is going to testify to kind of substantiate some of this stuff that Stephanie is saying, because that's what they do when they bring the names up, put the names out there. Then that opens the door for that person to be subpoenaed to come in and tell their story. And so it says she pitched her friend during a conversation with Kelly inside his car, where she said the singer told her he likes to cuddle and asked if I would be okay with that. Less than a week later, she said she met Kelly at his studio in Chicago, but had to wait hours in a small room before seeing him. After some chit-chat, Stephanie said that the pair had sex. Now, for these to be 16 and 17-year-olds, they show giving it up easy, right? Like, there's no hesitation whatsoever. They just dropping the panties and spreading their legs. So he said he wanted me to call him daddy, Stephanie said about the initial encounter. Soon after that encounter, the witness testified she told Kelly that she was 17, and then they always tell him after they have dropped the draws and gave it up. That's when they tell him, how old they are. To which the singer said that's okay. During their relationship, Stephanie said that she endured Kelly's volatile personality, which she described as either nice and charming or controlling and intimidating. He put the fear of God in me very quickly, she added. Stephanie said that in the winter of 1999, she ultimately stopped the relationship, during which she said Kelly forced her to participate in several tapes. I felt used and humiliated and degraded. I just didn't want to be abused anymore, she said. Asked on the stand why she would never forget R. Kelly's behavior, even though it was almost 3 decades ago, Stephanie broke down before explaining, because it was the lowest time of my life. And so she's saying that it was the lowest time of her life, but she said that she was easily manipulated into this relationship because of prior abuse with family, right, and boyfriends. So how was this the worst part of her life if she had already experienced these things? So then she said that I've never been treated like that before or since. He humiliated me, degraded me, he scared me. I'll never forget the way he treated me, she said. She added that before taking the stand, she had never publicly spoken about the abuse and never will again after this trial is over with. Prosecutors have said that Kelly abused at least 6 women. Then they go and talk about Aaliyah and the $500 bribe that Demetrius talked about. I thought, I'll talk about what I thought a little later when I come to that part. Prosecutors have also alleged that Kelly had contact with at least 2 John Does when they were minors, though he is not charged for those encounters. Kelly allegedly met John Doe number 1 in December of 2006 at a Chicago McDonald's. The second John Doe, who Kelly met when the individual was 16 or 17, was also allegedly forced to have filmed relationships with the singer and several of his girlfriends. So then they start saying Jane. So I think they're talking about Ariel crazy self, because it says Jane testified this week that Kelly also had groomed at least 1 male whom she only knew by the name Nephew. Now, isn't Nephew supposed to be Richard Arline? Seemed like I heard that somewhere before. And so it says Kelly said that he had been grooming Nephew since he was young like me, Jane said. And they're talking about Ariel here because this is that Pilar Melendez chick. And for some reason, she keeps referring to Ariel as Jane when Ariel said that her name was going to be Zale when she was on the witness stand. So I don't know why she keeps calling her Jane. So it says, Jane said, adding that she was forced to have sex with him on several occasions as punishment. The Grammy-winning singer has denied the allegations, and his defense team have indicated that the client accusers are simply disgruntled exes with an agenda. So during a 1999 dinner, Kelly went on a rant about the stigma of dating younger women before calling himself a genius and comparing himself to Jerry Lee Lewis, who married his teenage cousin. A witness testified in Brooklyn federal court on Thursday. He mentioned that he likes very young girls and that people make such a big deal of it. Even look at Jerry Lee Lewis. He is a genius and I am a genius. The witness, a woman who was identified in court as Stephanie, told jurors in the sex crime case against the singer. According to Stephanie, Kelly likened himself to the Great Balls of Fire artist whose career nosedived after he married his 13-year-old cousin in 1957 at the restaurant Houston's in Chicago. We should be allowed to do whatever we want. Look at what we give to the world, Kelly, who has pleaded not guilty, allegedly said. The dinner, which the woman said occurred amid a 6-month relationship with Kelly when she was 17, was also said to include the hip-hop duo Boo and Gotti. Stephanie, however, noted that she was not allowed to speak to the two rappers because it was against one of Kelly's rules. Now, see how she just name dropping out there? So now they got to go find Boo and Gotti so that they can corroborate her story. And then the way these Chicago rappers be dropping, is Boo and Gotti even still alive? I need to Google them and see who they are. So she says, I wasn't meant to speak to any men except for Mr. Kelly, the 39-year-old said. Kelly, 54, faces charges, and then they talk about the charges. And so what I find interesting is that, did she live with him for the full 6 months? Because she was 17 years old. Where was her parents? Where was her guardian? Where were her family and friends? Did nobody miss her during the 6 months? Or was she allowed to go back and forth, be with him, go home? Because I'm sure when they weren't together, she was looking at other men and talking to other men, and he could care less. He didn't have anybody escorting her around or spying on her, to come back and report to him whatever it is that she was doing. Okay, so Boo and Gotti were an American hip-hop duo composed of Sabrian Boo Sledge and Mawada Gotti Mitchell. They are perhaps best known for appearing on the 2001 hit Fiesta remix with Kelly and Jay-Z. The single peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100 and spent 5 consecutive weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot R&B, hip-hop singles and tracks. Other notable appearances include R. Kelly's I Wish remix, Big Timers 2002 single Oh Yeah, and the Fast and the Furious soundtrack. Following the success of Fiesta, the duo signed a record deal with Cash Money Records and recorded their debut album Perfect Timing, which was released during the summer of 2003. The album, however, was a commercial flop, only reaching number 195 on the Billboard 200. Following the album's failure, the duo was released from Cash Money. In 2005, Boo signed with Lil Wayne's Young Money Entertainment as a solo artist, but shortly parted ways with the label. So we don't know where Boo and his friend at, okay? Boo and Gotti, where they are. If you're from Chicago and you know who Boo and Gotti is, let me know if they still around, if they're still alive, like what's up with them now that they have been mentioned in this case, and how are they feeling about it, and are they slated to testify? So also taking the stand today was a guy named Tom Arnold, who was a manager for Kelly for 8 years, I believe he said. And he basically talked about how Kelly had all these rules and he would dock the employees' pay, if they went against something that he did. And I believe we heard somebody else talking about this. It was like a demerit system where if you didn't do certain things, then, it would come out of your paycheck. And I believe I told you guys in the video from Sunday about several employees that had sued Kelly over the years for lost wages, and I believe it was one of them, maybe the Anthony Navarro guy was the one that was talking about these rules. So in this story from Pilar Melendez, who I believe writes for Billboard and a couple of other publications, she says the former manager, whose name was Tom Arnold, also testified that while on tour, Kelly's entourage would always have pieces of paper on hand with the singer's number on it to hand out. Mostly, he said, The often typed up number was given out to females. A former studio manager for Kelly testified on Thursday that he ultimately left his job after being docked a week's pay for booking a male Disney World tour guide for the singer and his girlfriends. Tom Arnold, who said he worked for Kelly for over 8 years, said that week's fine, which cost him about $1,500, came after he was forced to book a male tour guide for a very last-minute trip for the singer and some female guests. Nobody was available, Arnold said about his decision to book a Disney male guide, even though one of Kelly's rules insisted it always had to be a female tour guide. The tour guide also went against all alleged rules that Kelly's girlfriends not be around other males or look at them in the eye if they were in the same vicinity. Arnold said that when Kelly and his guests arrived at the Orlando theme park, the singer stepped off the bus, saw the male guide, and immediately canceled the Disney experience. The former studio and tour manager noted that this was not the first time his pay was docked for disobeying Kelly's intense regime. Then he also told them about a story where somebody ate R. Kelly's donuts and he was pissed about it, and so he docked everybody's paycheck, which I can kind of like feel that, like, why are you eating my food? You don't have permission to eat my food. It's like when you work for a corporation and you guys have a break room and you put your lunch in the refrigerator. Then when lunch comes, your food is gone because one of your co-workers has eaten your food. And then, he might have had like a special kind of donut that he liked that it was hard to get, and so they in there eating his donuts, and so he was pissed about it. So I am not mad about that. It seemed like there was another story about him where it added a little more onto the story that he was telling, and then he was cross-examined, and upon the cross-examination, he was asked if this was, hold on, let me see if I can find that. Okay, so he was cross-examined by Thomas Farinella, who asked him if many of the rules, like the non-disclosure agreements for any studio guests, were in place for Kelly's privacy and safety. And Arnold says, yes, that was the case. So I guess during his testimony, he talked about non-disclosures and how when people came to the studio, they had to sign these non-disclosure agreements. But I couldn't find a story that actually talked about that in detail. But it looks like that's what was going on. And then another story that came out, that's being pushed out in the media is that Kelly has been trying to sell his publishing rights to some of his back catalogs, but no one wants to buy them. The singer is currently facing an ongoing trial as the reason why people don't want to attach themselves to the story. And they said that he began to try and sell these a couple of years ago, back in 2019, I guess, when all of this was started, but the people that he reached out to are saying no. And so it says he will also keep coming up on that. Sorry about that. They talk about the $4 million that was awarded to the Midwest Commercial and to the Heather Williams, that my understanding is currently being contested. So I don't know if Sony has actually paid the $1.5 million that was in his account out to Midwest Finance. And then they're also saying that this year alone, he has earned $1.7 million. And so that money should be going to the Midwest Financial people as well, who was awarded the first $1.5 million. And then once their $4 million is paid, then the Heather Williams is supposed to get her money. But like I said, there is an attorney or a law firm that has picked up the case, and they are fighting this. So I'm not sure if the money has actually paid out to anyone else. But they were saying that, despite there being a boom in the market for people buying publishing and for artists to be able to sell the rights to their works, that nobody really wants to pick up this case. And then it says, it has been offered to me a number of times by his team, and of course I have said no for the obvious reasons. And that was Mercuriadis, who is the founder of Hypnosis, and you guys know he's the one that's one of the people that's been on a buying spree, buying up catalogs. And so he said last month that they have spent over $1 billion on rights deals in the last year alone, including lucrative agreements with artists including Lindsey Buckingham, Blondie, and Neil Young. Another asset buyer who passed on Kelly's catalog in 2019 said, "We wouldn't go near it with a 10-foot pole." And so they're trying to get money, for the trial and for the attorneys and for the specialists that they need, but nobody's taking the bait. And to be honest about it, I think at this point it may be too late to bring in specialists to try and, help with this case, because it seems that if the trial is supposed to last for 4 weeks, it should be time for the defense to present their case at this point. But anyway, that is the news that's coming out, that he's trying to sell some of his back publishing, but nobody will take up the offer so that he can get money to help with his defense. And then not only the defense in the New York case, but remember there's also the 2 Chicago cases that he'll still need money for, to hire lawyers and that type of thing. So they're definitely blackballing him from every different direction. Another thing I wanted to point out was there have been several articles that have come across this week where reporters are actually just really talking about the defense and how they're handling the case. And I guess they're basically saying that what they are doing could possibly backfire. And so here was an article from yesterday by a guy named Dan Adler, and I believe this might have been in Vanity Fair. But it says the questionable results of R. Kelly's victim challenging defense. In a Brooklyn courtroom on Tuesday, Kelly's lawyer, Deborah Canick, had a pointed question for one of the singer's alleged abuse victims. During his cross-examination, Canick tried repeatedly to elicit description of how the woman was dancing the first time she met Kelly at a 2015 concert, and I believe that was Ariel that they're talking about. He then came to what appeared to be his smoking gun. "You were twerking, weren't you?" The woman, who testified anonymously over the course of 3 days, was in the middle of answering graphic questions about the extreme and systemic degradation that she claimed Kelly inflicted on her over the course of 5 years, beginning when she was 17. On Tuesday, she said that as punishment for breaking one of Kelly's rules, he once forced her to have sex with a male he had also groomed and filmed the encounter. The woman agreed to Canick's characterization of her dancing, but at that point, what could it have mattered? So they're saying, what did it matter if she was twerking or not at the time? What does it have to do with the case? And it says Kelly's federal trial on charges related to racketeering and trafficking began in U.S. District Court last week. The singer, who has denied all of the charges against him, faces an additional federal trial in Chicago on 13 counts. And then they talk about the Chicago case and the Cook County case. And then they talk about, as Nicole Blank Becker, another lawyer for Kelly, suggested last week, the defense's strategy has primarily focused on casting doubt on the motivation of the alleged victims. Becker's hours-long opening remarks veered between disjointed and mistaken, with her once urging the jury to find her client guilty before quickly correcting herself. She described the witnesses to come as financially driven, embittered fans with an agenda. Some enjoyed the notoriety of being able to tell their friends that they were with a superstar, Becker said in her statement. In cross-examination on Thursday, Canick put a finer point on the approach by asking Geronda Pace, who alleges that Kelly began abusing her when she was 16, if she was a groupie. "You were in fact stalking him, right?" Canick asked. "That is not right," Pace replied. The defense's attempts to find inconsistencies in witnesses' accounts have yielded some bizarre results. Koenig asked Pace somewhat incredulously how it was possible that she went from age 14 in April 2008 to age 16 in May 2009, prompting Pace to explain that her birthday is April 19. And I've talked about that in a couple of my previous videos, that I thought that was really a bad mistake that he made. But it's one that a lot of people made, because I've had to point out, like over the past year, people talking about she lied about her age. And I keep saying, no, she was 14 when the trial started. She turned 15 2 years later, and then it was a year later when she actually formally, allegedly met him and was at the house and at the party. And I show you guys the pictures that were entered in the exhibits of her in the mirror room, laying in the bed, taking selfies of herself, proving that she had a phone. And Koenig pointed out that there was a bathroom in that bedroom also. So on Wednesday, Koenig continued his cross-examination of the second accuser. He asked her to read a long letter she had purportedly written to her brother, and they're talking about Ariel here, in which she claimed that her parents were pressuring her to begin a sexual relationship with Kelly as a way to extort him. But by this point in the trial, with so many of Kelly's alleged methods of control already laid out, this wasn't so much damning evidence as a detour for the prosecution to explore. During the government's follow-up questions, the woman testified that her brother never saw the letter. She said that Kelly told her exactly what to say in the letter, which he would keep for protection for himself in the event of a trial like this. So they're trying to paint this picture that following his 2008 trial, that his attorney, who I'm assuming is the Gleason guy who has since passed away, that he told Kelly that going forward to have his girlfriends write these letters incriminating themselves in case he ended up getting arrested again, then he can use these letters as blackmail or some concocted story. But I would think that at the end of that 2008 trial, that the attorney would have said, you dodged a bullet here. You need to get your act together. You need to leave these young women alone. Find you somebody that's, in their 20s with common sense. That I think that would have been the conversation that the lawyer would have had, not how to set somebody up in case you find yourself in this situation again. So that made absolutely no sense to me. So Kelly came into his trial with the legal team, Koenig, Becker, Thomas Farinella, and Calvin Scholar, that had recently gone through an acrimonious reshuffle. Two more of Kelly's lawyers, Steve Greenberg and Michael Leonard, quit the case in June after a series of conflicts with Becker and Farinella. And you guys know Greenberg has appeared on CBS this morning, and then it seemed like I saw him on another interview where he basically was trying to help the defense along, with explaining to the audience exactly what's going on with these witnesses and how the defense is approaching them, because, what they're saying isn't true. And so it says Steve Greenberg and Michael Leonard quit the case in June after a series of conflicts with Becker and Farinella. And then they're quoted, Greenberg is quoted as saying, you sort of want to take the high road, but they're just really effing him over, these two. He told the New York Daily News at the time, we don't want to be with people who don't have any experience and don't want to do the work. Judge Anne-Marie Donnelly questioned Becker in a pretrial hearing about whether she had a conflict of interest because of her previous contact with two of Kelly's former living girlfriends, one of whom is who is now expected to testify as a witness for the government. So it came out today that Jocelyn is supposed to testify next week, and her parents are supposed to be coming, and they say that they're going to block her from going in that courthouse and testifying, that they're going to be there on the scene, all of next week, so that on the day that Jocelyn's supposed to testify, they're going to stop her. And so I read this article before I saw the video from Tim Savage where he was saying that he was going to show up and stop Jocelyn. And so when I read that, I thought it was weird that in this article, they're talking about Ariel in the article, and she's the girlfriend that's testifying, right? But now that I know that Jocelyn is supposed to be coming next week and the prosecution has not tied up their case yet, I'm starting to think that it is Jocelyn that they're talking about that's going to testify as a witness for the government, unless it is Dominique or Hallie. Maybe it's one of them. I'm not sure, but I'm thinking since the Savages are saying they're going to be there next week, that perhaps this is Jocelyn that they're talking about. So it goes on and says, neither Becker nor Farinella has previous federal trial experience, and Farinella had his law license suspended in 2011 after allegations that he improperly used a client's credit card and otherwise neglected clients' affairs, which we already know about that because that came out during the hearing that they had. So it says, from the press room and overflow room with a courtroom video feed as ordered by Donnelly because of coronavirus concerns, the impact of Kelly's defense tactics can be murky. Kelly has rarely reacted throughout testimony and the jurors aren't visible, but the horrors of the alleged abuse have so far seemed to eclipse the defense's implication that the victims invited it. All the while, the more that Kelly's lawyers have tried to make the alleged victims appear scattered, the more they have looked at themselves. I don't know what that means. Maybe they're saying that the more they're trying to make them seem scattered, the more convincing that the people that are testifying are. And so it says, R. Kelly's defense team aims to undermine accusers' credibility as first week trial unfolds. Kelly's supporters have characterized the accusers as unreliable groupies, hoping to profit off their connection to the singer, but an aggressive attack on their credibility in front of the jury could backfire. And speaking of his supporters, I guess there's been like a couple of rumblings in the courtroom. I think I told you guys on Friday they had like a little miniature lockdown because something was going on in the lobby with the supporters. Then I was told that those fake R. Kelly sisters, Cassandra and Lisa, showed up. And then that caused a commotion because then they got on camera again talking about they are the sisters. Well, we know doggone well they are not the sisters. And for the people that keep saying, yes, they are, yes, they are. If you remember when they first came out, I can't remember who exposed them, but somebody exposed them and showed that Kelly isn't even their last names. Their last names is something totally different. And then if you watch Precedence, where they did their part in Precedence, where they're assuming, that their father is R. Kelly's father and all this stuff. But the fake sisters, once again, made it onto the news, running their mouths, lying to the camera about they the sisters and all this stuff. And then Daddy Lolo was interviewed, and he keeps saying that he is R. Kelly's godson, which I thought that was disproved. Dana J did show up at the trial, but I haven't seen him so far being interviewed by any media or anything. And so they talk about in several articles about the murals, the sidewalk chalk art that's being done by nobody's nothing. Listen at me. I'm tired. Nobody's nothing. I can't even think of what is her name, y'all? How did I forget her name? Nobody's Anything, I think is her name. But she was doing the beautiful chalk art murals, and then I guess there was a bad storm last weekend and the mural was washed away, and she was supposed to come back and do another one, but then the Pilar chick posted a video of a new mural, but it looked like a white lady was out there doing the mural. So I'm not sure if maybe she had on a wig or something, maybe a blonde wig, and it was her. I couldn't tell based on the video that she presented, but somebody did do chalk art on to replace what was there before, and it said something to the effect that the king, R. Kelly, the king, is not a disgrace or something along those lines. But it is good to see that they are continuing, to keep that messaging on the sidewalk. What else? They were talking about the music, how they had been playing music really loud the past, the first week, and that you could actually hear the music in the courthouse. But they were saying that the music hasn't been as prominent this week as it was last week. And it was one other thing. And then I heard somebody say, like on Twitter, it wasn't one of the reporters, it was just somebody talking on Twitter, that the supporters can no longer wear T-shirts into the courthouse that say that, they support R. Kelly, or any messaging about R. Kelly. Not sure if that is true or not. That was just a tweet that I came across on Twitter. Okay, and then in an article with John Seidel, he talked about they're, once again, they're questioning the defense and saying that, they're not experienced in what they're doing. He says in opening statements, Kelly's defense attorney, Nicole Blank-Becker, warned jurors, don't assume everybody's telling the truth. And as the trial has unfolded, Kelly's defense team has done its best to undermine the credibility of people who have taken the stand. Doing so could mean striking a difficult balance when it comes to Kelly's accusers, though. While Kelly's lawyers and supporters have longed for the opportunity to reveal the women as unreliable groupies, hoping to profit off their connection to the singer, an aggressive attack on the credibility in front of the jury could backfire. And then he interviewed a Chicago area defense attorney named Terry Eckel. And Terry Eckel says that you can just get in their face and just start screaming you can't just get in their face and start screaming at them. The jury will start to sympathize with that person. And then he went on later in the article and stated, I thought he had another comment. Oh, and then he starts talking about when Koenig interviewed or questioned Geronda and said, you wrote a book, am I correct? Pace said, yes, I did. And then he asked her about her compensation. And I reported to you guys before that even though she said she self-published a book, she's claiming that she made between $25,000 and $100,000. Then the writer goes on. I thought he had some more quotes in here from that Echo guy. Oh, yes, he did. Okay, let me read this part first, and then I'll tell you what the Echo guy said. It says, crucial testimony also came from former tour manager Demetrius Smith, who testified under an immunity order and made clear he didn't want to participate in the trial, told jurors he paid the $500 bribe to secure a fake ID for Aaliyah, who died in a plane crash. The feds say Kelly married Aaliyah to prevent her from testifying against him after he came to believe that she had gotten pregnant. On cross-examination, Koenig asked Smith, now, Robert never had anything to do with you bribing anyone to get a marriage license. Am I correct? No, he didn't, Smith said. With Assistant U.S. Attorney Maria Cruz Melendez had a chance to ask follow-up questions. She asked whether Kelly was present for a discussion about the bribe, and Demetrius said, I'm pretty sure, I think so, but I'm just not positive. Even if I said it before, I'm not positive now. I just don't see that in my head right now, he later added. I don't remember if Robert was there. And then Smith also insisted that Aaliyah should be left alone. I shouldn't be talking about Aaliyah. So a second accuser took the stand this week, and more are expected to follow to effectively cross-examine such witnesses. Echo said defense attorneys hope to show bias. It helps when attorneys are able to point out testimony from a witness that contradicts previous comments or even to a past admission of bias made to another witness. But corroborating evidence can be used by prosecutors to support the testimony of an otherwise flawed witness. And now, 13 years after purported victim refused to testify led to Kelly's acquittal, the multiple accusers in the Brooklyn racketeering case may wind up corroborating each other through similarities in their testimonies. So when he's talking about the previous witness, now they're saying that she purported victim refused to testify, but we know that that is not true, that Rashonda never did refuse to testify, that the prosecutor simply rolled the dice and said that it was better not to call her to the witness stand than it would have been to call her, and that is why Rashonda supposedly did not testify. And that came from an interview on like a popular news show, you know, like one of the 60-minute type shows. That information came out that they elected not to call her to the witness stand. So I'm not sure why they continue with this story, you know, that he was hiding her, that she refused to testify, that he paid them $20 million, and all these other stories that have surfaced through the year. So he is basically saying, the Echoes guy, that because they've now brought in all these women and grilled them and, you know, rehearsed with them on their testimony to make sure that they're all telling the same story, that is going to probably supersede any other evidence that they might have. And then I find it also interesting that they were supposed to have all these videotapes, and I would think that the tapes will come out as the witnesses are testifying, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And then it is possible that maybe they'll introduce whatever videos or pictures or whatever it is that they're claiming that they have later on. But usually when you introduce evidence, you introduce it when the witness says, oh, he made me do a video, and then they'll be like, oh, let's show that video. You know, they wouldn't wait until the end. So really confused about the strategy that they have. But what I will tell you about the transcript that I was able to get, they have a long list, like 2 pages worth of evidence that was introduced as exhibits in the case, although it doesn't tell you what the evidence was. And then the Matthew guy with Inner City Press, he was getting the evidence the first 2 days, and he was sharing it on his website. But then on the 3rd day, Judge Donnelly did a ruling that they would no longer release the evidence to the press. So they are really, you know, trying to keep this thing under wraps. Don't want anybody to know about any of this stuff. And then there was also a article that I was reading where they were talking about how, actually it was some tweets that were going around, that they were actually treating this like, you know, he's John Gotti, like worse than John Gotti, and trying to keep this thing, you know, under wraps and so secretive, when there are people out there that have actually murdered people, you know, in the commission of their RICO case, and that was open to the public and information was flowing freely. But then with this case, you know, which is all about, you know, him messing with these young girls and them being mad, which has nothing to do with the RICO case, until y'all hear how they have rephrased, how they've repackaged racketeering in this case to fit their narrative. But I'll get to that in a second. And so then he goes on to talk about, you know, Kelly made the victims write blackmail letters. The witness read for the jury parts of one letter in which she told Kelly that if he tried to break up with her, I'm going to tell everyone that you are me, you know, the R-A-P word. I'm going to say you did that to me since I was a minor. And so those are the letters that they're claiming that this past lawyer told him that he needed to make these girls write in order to protect himself if he is ever arrested again. And so it says, R&B hitmaker Kelly forced girlfriends to write fake blackmail letters that he could use to defend himself in case he got charged with abusing them. One of his abusers testified on Wednesday at his New York City trial. The witness testified as a Jane Doe in federal court in Brooklyn, and this is Ariel that's on the stand. Read for the jury parts of one letter in which she told Kelly that if he tried to break up with her, "I'm going to tell everyone that you are me. I'm going to say you ard me since I was a minor." And they actually say the word. We have to be careful on the tube. Her notes to him also warned that she would spank herself really hard enough to leave bruises so she could accuse him of beating her. After the defense confronted the witness with the letter, she insisted the abuse was real and that the writings were a ploy engineered by Kelly to protect him in a trial like this from very serious charges. Kelly's defense team aims to undermine the accuser's credibility as first week of trial unfolded. Decades of abuse, and then talking about the alleged charges. It says the woman, now 23, had previously detailed how she was groomed and exploited by Kelly starting in 2015 when she was a 17-year-old aspiring singer. The defense sought to discredit her with the letters and other evidence it claims showed her parents were behind a scheme to take advantage of Kelly's fame. Assistant U.S. Attorney Elizabeth Geddes responded by giving a point-by-point rundown of her testimony, including allegations that he intentionally isolated and demeaned her with perverted punishments. She then asked the witness whether the blame fell on your parents or the defendant, and she responded, the defendant. And so that questioning came about because it came out in the trial that Ariel told them that she had been abused by her parents prior to going to live with R. Kelly, that they were abusive, that they were trying to force her to get him to invest in business ventures, that the mom tried to get a job as a driver or an assistant with R. Kelly. And so she was basically saying that it was easy for her to fall for R. Kelly and to want to go live with him because of the abuse that she had experienced with her own parents. And so when the prosecution got up to recross, they were basically drilling in, who was the person that did this to you? Was it your parents or was it Mr. Kelly? Who was the one that beat you? Was it your parents or Mr. Kelly? Who was the one that made you do this, made you do that? And then the answer to each one of those questions was the defendant. And let's see what else is in here. Then they recap about Demetrius and the marriage license. Then here's an article from Law and Order that was from August 24th. And they were basically saying the same thing. Let's see. Oh, they compared. I thought this was interesting. It says, this was an article where they were talking about, I believe, women who defend people who were charged with crimes like R. Kelly. And this was by someone named Kathleen Walsh. And she says, as R. Kelly's long-awaited trial got underway last week, I was unsurprised to see that the most public-facing of the 4 defense lawyers representing Kelly was also the lone woman among them. If you are a hugely famous alleged rapist and sex pest with accusers on the double digits, there is an obvious optical advantage to having a woman as the public face of your legal team. Harvey and Donna Andrew it says Harvey had Donna Ritono, Andrew Cuomo had Rita, and Bill Cosby had Jennifer Bunjing. And now Kelly has Nicole Blank-Becker, a Michigan-based attorney who has used her credentials as a former crimes state prosecutor to build a personal brand specializing in assault defense. And then she says, of course, women have been throwing one another under the bus in the service of terrible men for some time, but still I am darkly fascinated by women who have made a career out of it. What woman would choose to defend an R. Kelly, the kind of woman who has no compunction with weaponizing her gender for her own advantage? That's who Becker and her ilk are bringing the outrage-mongering techniques perfected in the media by the likes of Ann Coulter and Candace Owens to the actual courtroom. So she is very upset that Nicole took this case. I mean, aren't lawyers supposed to defend people in court? If you're a defense attorney, people come to you to represent them, and then you choose based on what they say whether or not you're going to choose them. But she seems to feel that women should not defend men that are in these type of cases. So she says Becker played all the hits in her opening statement at Kelly's trial, starting with repeatedly referring to the accusers as girls and making vague references to forthcoming drama. Groupie, we don't usually like to use that word, but it is a word, is an understatement, Becker said, as of presenting a bold insight. She predicted, you will add her to the saying, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, the subtext of this ocean of misogyny. I am a woman, so I can say it. No high-profile sexual assault defense attorney has been as straightforward about the devil's bargain as Don Ratoni, who defended Harvey W. I have the ability to get away with a lot more in a courtroom cross-examining a female than a male lawyer does, she said in a pre-W Chicago Magazine interview. As women attorneys like Ratono and Becker are assumed to have more instinctive empathy for the accusers, giving their bad faith. Well, why didn't you just leave? Attacks a veneer of objectivity. He may be an excellent lawyer, but if he goes at that woman with the same venom that I do, he does look like a bully. If I do it, nobody even bats an eyelash, and it's been very effective, Ratono said. During the Weinstein trial, she opined that her cross-examination would just look like two women talking. And so she goes on talking about her, and most of the article she's talking about her, but then she'll throw in something about Nicole. So she goes and she's talking about, how someone was dressed. Bill Cosby's attorney, Jennifer Bonin, wore an elegant gold necklace and shift dresses. Becker's website includes several photos of the lawyer at work in a white and pink office, leaning against a fuzzy accent pillow and confidently filing paperwork in 5-inch pumps. Nicole is compassionate, declares one heading in her bio, highlighting an apparently unique capacity for emotional labor. The text coos, Nicole understands that facing sex charges doesn't mean that you are a terrible person. So this is just someone, she goes on and on and on and on, rambling for quite some time about how, she doesn't like women who defend men, who've been accused of certain charges. Then she goes on and she says, having prosecuted assault cases herself, Becker surely knows how rare it is for accusers to win. According to RAINN statistics, of every 310 assaults reported to police, only 28 result in a conviction and only 25 result in incarceration. And yet the one through point in her defense thus far has been that Kelly's accusers are a pack of lying ex-girlfriends out for revenge. Blame the victim. That's the job of effective defense counsel, writes defense attorney Tony Messina in Above the Law. And as a woman, that job can be tough. and surely Becker knows the consequences of such an effective defense because, well, who doesn't? Witnesses are regularly re-traumatized by victim blaming during cross-examination. It is an essential part of recovery for survivors to understand that what happened to them is not their fault, and a harsh cross-examination can dismantle it all, perhaps most impactfully when it's done by a woman. And so then she goes on and on talking about that. But my thing is, every person that's accused of a crime has the right to a defense. People go to law school to become lawyers so that they can represent people, right? So I'm not sure why she thinks that women aren't supposed to represent men who have been accused of crimes, when we all know that the Constitution states that you are innocent until you are proven guilty, and you can't remain innocent unless you have a good defense representing you. So I believe that that was all that I had as far as the updates for this week. Like I said, not sure what's going on. There's a lot of stuff that's floating around YouTube, about evidence that's going to be entered, evidence that's going to be thrown out, who's supposed to be coming to testify, who's not testifying, whose side they're testifying on. But I can't find any of that information because we have a court reporter this week who doesn't think that, she's supposed to give out these transcripts that she has been charged with creating and sending out to people who are willing to purchase them. So can't really give you much information as far as what's going on at that point. I can, give you the information from Monday, which I will do in a separate video. So that's it for me for this week's update. Look for that video to come out. Probably won't be until tomorrow, but it will be coming. The transcript is like 272 pages, which really amounts to probably 80 pages, like if I was reading a book. But the way that they have it spaced out and lined out and the size of the text, it really isn't, that long of a document. So I'll probably go through it tonight and then post the video tomorrow. So I want to thank, before I go, the people that have contributed to help pay for transcripts if we can get them. If I don't get any more this week from this girl, which it doesn't appear that I'm going to be able to do, then I will try with the new court reporter that comes on next week and see if she, will be more professional and more willing to pass out the transcripts. And if she doesn't, then that will confirm to me that Judge Dunley is behind that. But I do want to thank the people that did send in donations. And then I also use the money from the super chats that I was given in my Sunday's broadcast that I did. That's what I used to pay for the transcript from Monday. Okay, so that's it for me. If all minds are clear, go ahead, leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.